Dear Mr. President, Your Excellencies, Secretaries of State, and Mr. Ministerial Commissioner, Mr. Erno Rubik, and ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you at the Foundation for the Moholina University of Art and Design of the Libri Publishing and the university itself at the international book launch party of Erno Rubik's book, Cubed. The book will be put on the shelves of Hungarian bookstores today, and then in the next weeks we will see them in the stores in Germany, in the US, UK, Netherlands, and then in October in China, Korea, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic, and so forth. This book is about many things, about creativity, symmetry, education, architecture, questions, playfulness, contradictions, and even about beauty. But if I want to just formulate the essence of this book, what it's about puzzles. First of all, let me invite the President of Hungary, János Áder, onto the stage to give his speech. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This was not the original scenario, and I hope that you don't mind that we have changed the order with the director, Mr. Director Gergely Böszörményi Nagy. We have changed just the order of our speeches, not our roles. I hope that you agree with this. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear Mr. Rubik, once a young man was looking for an investor for his invention. The bank, however, on the door of which he was knocking, gave a disappointing response. I quote, "We have examined your invention, which is indeed an interesting novelty. However, we find its commercial potential is not profitable." This letter was signed by a certain J.P. Morgan, an American banker who, at least in this matter, has not proven to be a very apt businessman. Who could have been the investor? And what was the invention, though? The correct answer is Alexander Graham Bell, and the invention, now you have figured it out, is the telephone. The telephone, which eventually turned out to be one of the most profitable ideas of human history, a lasting success story that has changed our lives fundamentally. Ladies and gentlemen, the road to almost every invention is one full of obstacles, of slow, meticulous work, of a not very spectacular game of patience, or even unexpected turns of events. This, thus far unbeaten path, has to be cleared with talent, patience, and a lot of work. The story of the magic cube illustrates this very well. How did it start? What was the goal? To whom did he first show it? Did he have faith in it? Would he have thought? These questions are asked, instead of us, the laymen, the outsiders, are asked by Erno Rubik himself in his new book. In Cubed, he sheds light not only on a job well done, on the series of events surrounding the cube, but also on a way of thinking, a worldview, a working method. I am always eager, writes Rubik, to try to understand things better, especially those things that we take for granted. The cube has been granted and part of our lives for over 4 decades now, so it was high time that the person who knows it for the longest wrote a book about it. He who carved the first wooden cubies, who tried to untangle the first elastic knot, and who first tried to return the cube to its original state. When 6 years ago in New Jersey, I had the honor of opening the exhibition on the occasion of the Rubik's Cube's 40th anniversary. I mentioned that all objects that an average person, or in that given case an average American, will probably encounter during an average day, that is the invention of a Hungarian mind. Our imaginary average friend from overseas probably wrote with a ballpoint pen, a biro created of László Bíró, reinforced his immune system with the vitamin C extracted by Albert Szentgyörgyi. He worked on a computer developed from the remarkable invention of János Neumann, drove a late descendant of the first Ford models conceived by Hungarian engineers. And then in the evening he watched a movie with his wife starring Hollywood's Hungarian superstars. And of course he tried real hard to solve the puzzle of the Rubik's Cube. These are all things that we take for granted today. But once, they all needed a Hungarian mastermind to invent them, to create them, and so that we can use them later on. Cube, the title of which in Hungarian translates as Our Cube, already indicates in its title that we Hungarians have a completely different emotional connection to this worldwide success. It's understandable since the cube started its world-conquering journey from here, from Hungary. For us, this cube will always be, above all, red, white, and green. The other colors are just bonus. For Erno Rubik, according to him, the cube is his child. For us, it is a member of our family who makes us proud, the messenger of Hungarian creativity. It is no longer just an object, but an endless puzzle, a timeless and inspiring phenomenon, a visual mark, a further reflection of a form. It's a symbol that goes beyond itself. It is an invention which over and over again sets us up for amusement, sometimes a little frustration, but definitely for a great challenge. The cube's existence proves the theorem that Erno Rubik formulated as follows. If you are curious, you will find the puzzles around you. If you are determined, you will solve them. Ladies and gentlemen, we learn from the book, this much I can reveal, that Erno Rubik finds in general very little pleasure in writing. I haven't counted the times he warns the reader that he actually does not like writing. The correct number is somewhere between the number of the faces of the cube and the number of possible moves and combinations to solve the cube. Nevertheless, despite all these excuses and the lack of love for writing, in the end we have an extremely lovable and engaging book. A confession that tells entertaining stories, contemplates, and lets us in on secrets. He writes about what is the essence of the cube: curiosity, understanding, puzzles, persistence, questions and answers. And although one can turn this book in less combinations than the cube, I'm certain that it will still become popular as its author, Erno Rubik, and its protagonist, Our Cube.
Köszönjük szépen elnök úrnak, most pedig engedjék meg, hogy szólítsam Böszörményi Nagy Gergelyt, a Moholi Nagy Művészeti Egyetemért
the president of the Foundation for the Moholi Nagy University of Art and Design.
Kockát.
The cube.
Én nem találtam fel.
I have not invented the cube.
Csak felfedeztem.
I've only discovered it.
A számomra legmaradandóbb foszlány első közös beszélgetésünkből Rubik Ernővel 10 évvel ezelőtt.
Detail of a discussion I had with Erno Rubik dates 10 years ago, from 10 years ago. The Hungarian geniuses are always very very embarrassed, not embarrassed about their talents, but they are very modest, from Krisztina Egerszegi, from Béla Bartók to Erno Rubik. Their invention seems very natural to them, and the appreciation is very foreign to us. They cannot comprehend why the interest in their person, and they actually don't even want to deal with it. I've only discovered it, they all say. It's not the prototype of the American inventor of the people, of the businessmen with eager to conquer the world, but Erno Rubik and the cube have, despite all this, conquered the world. They conquered not just Hungary, but also the entire world, as Hungary is also in the middle of Europe, has this source of creativity, finesse, and Hungary plays a very important role in this worldwide tendency of creativity. It's not an easy thing to do. Hungarian modernization was always submitted of imperial intentions and motivations. We've always rather been charged of lesser tasks, despite the fact that the potential is that our nation provides the world could be the finesse, strategic, our strategic autonomy could be based on our creativity and not just our logistical function. There is no moment like the present. The success stories of the 21st century that are on the border areas of design and business and technological inventions and innovations. Some are even addressing issues, social issues and cultural issues. Who says that it couldn't be us who provides the world with solutions? The foundation for the Moholy Nagy University of Art and Design, its history of 150 years, and with the joint effort of the students and their partners, they will work and keep on working for making creativity and innovation in Hungary one of the key catalysts and the key resources of international solutions and innovations to extend even radically the constructive impact of our work on our reality. This is an immense road ahead of us. I think that design was never actually about how it looks, but how it works. And I think this also applies for the university of the future. So, what are we doing with this opportunity that we are given, with this new building? Will we inhabit it? We will live in it, and we will further develop this European level and unique campus. We will appreciate the faculty of and the team working here on the university even more. We will try to increase their salaries. We will support them in all their works and all their efforts. We will also maybe try to invite internationally valuable people to our faculty. We will also support our citizens of this university and also support those our partners from abroad, and later on we will try to present the world and the
És a kreatív probléma megoldás.
International university life with even more potential.
De a magyar üzleti vezetők, menedzserek.
All this investment in our university has also made our innovation center more competitive on an international scale. We are also supporting with our work the small and medium enterprises and their products and the human capital. We also are facilitating and trying to profit from the intellectual and creative energies that these people are capable of doing. We are also trying to expand the resources of the university to an exceptional extent. We are building an international brand that will be acknowledged everywhere in the world. By 2030, we want to make MOME, our university, one of the most creative innovation centers of this region that will be not just measurable but will be spectacular. Why? So that we can become a conscious managers of Hungarian talent, so that after 2020, in the next decades to come, that the new successors of inventors such as the one who created the cube will be even more numerously trained at our universities. So I would like to thank Erno Rubik for inspiring this legacy. Ladies and gentlemen, this book has had a long journey before you could hold this in your hands. Ádám Halmos from Libri Publishing has been working on this book for long years, and now let me invite Ádám Halmos and Erno Rubik to the stage so they can talk about this book called Cubed.
Hát köszönjük szépen a kedves köszöntéseket elnök úrnak.
Thank you very much for these nice words by the Mr. President and of Hungary and also Mr. President of the foundation. I'm very glad, Mr. Rubik, that we are sitting here. I think 4 years ago was the first time that we sat down. And that was the first time that we actually started to consider the idea of making a book about the cube. And I think that at that time you have formulated 3 things that was important to you. The first one was that if we are making a book, it has to be for the international market, which made it so that the original language of the book is English. Second thing, that even though I really tried to convince the author that the book has to have a structure, it has to be developed somehow, and we should brainstorm about it. Very soon I had to realize that this process will be completely different from what I imagined. It will be an interesting creative process, and that's what was important. It was a process of a creative process, and not to establish the structure beforehand. Your third condition or desire was to have a book where it's not only about you, but it's also about the cube.
Az elsőről szeretnék egy mondatot még.
I want to add a thought about this first item that I just listed. So the reason or that we could have this book, that we could realize this book, did take a very long journey, a lot of work. First, we had to find American investors where we found Flatiron. It was through an auction, and then we had to find a British publishing house to join our project. And then with the contribution of American and English and British editors, we could achieve to have a great quality English text, of which we translated it back into Hungarian. And the other two things, the two conditions, I think that I would give you the chance to expand on that, to elaborate on that. What was the structure that is not even a structure that on which this book was built, and also how the cube appears in this book beside you? Yeah, you can see that publishing books is not even that easy as one would think. It would be if the authors wouldn't be so problematic personalities, or at least some of them wouldn't be so difficult to handle. I also have to add that it's not that easy with the publishing houses either. It's a very, it goes both ways. And I'm not even talking about the Hungarian publishing house, but rather the American, which had a very different approach to authors. But we did overcome the challenges. This type of work is always a collaboration. Probably there is an ideal situation where the author writes the manuscript, hands it to the publishing house, they just publish it, and then they invite the author for the book launch or the first reading of the book, and then that's it. But the readers, I want to mention the readers. I think they are one of the most important actors or components of this whole book thing. And it's not just because they are the most numerous part of the equation, but also because they are the one who give eternal life to the books. They are the one who read the book and keep them alive, and they are the reason why there are new editions. We will see what the fate of this one will be. It's not a book that is meant for eternity, I have to admit. It's rather just a glimpse of a present, if just a glimpse sheds light on a moment in the life of a person, or even in the life of an object. I don't think that these are very lasting thoughts. Some thoughts do strive for centuries or even for thousands of years if the content of the thought is something that can be eternal or timeless. I hope that in this book there are certain thoughts. Obviously, you need the reader's eye to find these thoughts, but I hope that I was able to put some content in this that can have a value that will stand the trial of time, even though it was not something that I intended to. That was not my primary motivation with this book. I just tried to somehow write certain thoughts, to gather certain thoughts that are associated or related to this time period in my life that was determined the fate, well, of the cube and also my fate. And it was a time I wanted to solve the puzzle, not the puzzle of the cube, but of us. How can such a thing, such an object, mean all the things that it represents for people or has represented for people? How can this have such an impact on us? That's the puzzle. How could it have reached so many people, so many different people of different age, different time, different culture, different everything? It's still can be retraced to a very similar reaction, which is this engaging desire to solve the puzzle of the cube. So this question was my primary motivation, why I started to write this book. So, because these puzzles are usually unsolvable, because these are not something that have one answer. It's probably, even if I discover discover one or solve one layer of the puzzle, it will still then maybe transform into another puzzle, and then maybe there are several solutions to the puzzle, and then hopefully one day people will gather all these solutions, and then that will give a bigger picture. I'm sure that this object that is the common denominator in all these different aspects is what I find interesting. In the book, you start with clearing it with the reader, that you usually meet a lot of journalists. You've been asked the same questions over and over again in your life, and you just give the answers right away to get it out of the way. So if a reader was only reading the book for getting the answers of how much time it took for you to create the cube, to solve the cube, etc., etc., and then after getting this out of the way, you start discussing this idea of questions, and asking questions and asking the right questions. And you give an example of a question, which is, what impact does the cube have on us? And how does the cube describe the mechanism of our minds, of how our minds work? This book launch thing is very new to me, so I really don't want to take away. I don't want to dissuade people from reading this book, or books, but I do think that such an event is not fit for actually transmitting all that a book is about. There is a reason why books are printed, or why they are now, that bookstores are sometimes even closed. That is, now we can even access these texts digitally, so there's absolutely no limit to accessing the book. So I would actually prefer to talk about readers who have already read the book and who have had questions while reading the book or after reading the book that maybe I could answer, or where we could answer together. So I think that would be more to my liking. It's very difficult to give just a taste of things. It can incite curiosity. But what if the curiosity is already there? Then you don't need the tasting samples. I have the curiosity of what these words composing these sentences, composing these pages and this book. So what does this text give to the readers? What do they find in the text? How do they interpret it? How do they like it? There are many ways of reading a book. Sometimes you start reading a book and then you won't get up from your chair until you've read the last page. Sometimes you just turn the pages and just looking for things in it. You can read a book from the back to the front, or you can start in the middle. I think this book, since it's not telling a story, it doesn't have a beginning or an end. It's not a story of a life. It's not the story about an object. it's not how an object came from the prototype through production to the fake cube productions that had to be destroyed. So it's not a series of events that has to be read from the beginning to the end. It was a process that I tried to find even the details in my memory that might have been covered up by the years, and then I tried to I really tried to reveal something that I think about this, the thoughts that I have in association with this whole process of my life, this period of my life. About the journalists that I talked to so far, it was very interesting, and I really enjoyed it. That it was always with journalists who have had the chance to read the book. Yesterday, I was talking with journalists, several journalists who have not read the book, not all of them, and the questions they ask are so different from the ones that I'm asked by people who have read the English text beforehand. It is completely different things that start to interest these journalists if they have read it. There were people who have read it twice, which was very surprising to me because I couldn't even read it from cover to cover in once. So it was very surprising to me. They could even quote from it without having to look at their notes. So certain thoughts that they found so interesting that they were able to memorize it. I found it so interesting, and then it also inspired questions in them, which then they asked to me. So we could have a very interesting discussion either online. I don't really like this online communication. It's very disturbing when the connection breaks, but still we could have an interesting discussion. One of the things that I have that I remember from this process is that in several versions of the text it always somehow it was a recurring thought that the cube is very simple and complex at the same time. It's about success, how one can achieve success, and it's also about a frustration experience, sometimes even a failure, not being able to solve the puzzle. So there are countless contradictions and oppositions that come to mind in relation with the cube. What do you think about that? What do you have to say about these contradictions? Well, if someone starts to deal with this cube, with this object, there are so many things that one can think of, so many directions from which one can approach. That's why it became so popular, I think. Some are what you've just mentioned, but and also many things that are so typical, so characteristic of our lives, of our existence, of our universe, where there's light, there's shadow, where there's cold and warm cannot exist without one another. So we live in a world of contradictions, of opposing extremes, of this polarized nature of being is really something that is our reality. And it's very interesting to see how inanimate, immobile object is able to inspire such thoughts. I say immobile because normally if you just put it down it doesn't do anything. I have heard of moving Rubik's cubes that are actually, they install a certain mechanism that make it turn in certain ways that can solve itself. So really You see all kinds of things today. Now there are cubes that can have a conversation, they can connect to internet, and we can see how on another continent another cube is doing what. So you see all kinds of things. Human ingeniousness and human innovations have no limits, and the extension to human creation is really limitless. It's another question whether all these extensions add something in value, or whether they just add something that is unnecessary, that is an extra burden on it, which take away from the value of the original creation. For me, the cube is an object, this game that exists, and it creates a whole with the person who plays with it, because that's when we create change. And change is created when it is created, and then we come across challenges, we use our knowledge to tackle these challenges, and we are trying to repeat useful elements of our useful knowledge so that we arrive to the solution of a problem. So I think this is all in the cube. Besides this idea of contradictions or this pair of oppositions, there's another thing that I find very interesting, that the cube is something that is stable and something that can move. It's a cube, but it represents a circular motion. So what motion does this cube show us? Why is it so intriguing, in your opinion? What does it make it so unique? When I talked about the puzzle of the cube, I also admitted that I have not solved the puzzle of the cube, in the sense that I haven't cracked this mystery, why it's so unique and why it's so intriguing. I have discovered certain parts of this mystery, and I'm very happy if anyone has contributing ideas about what this makes it very so intriguing. I think movement or motion is a key element indeed. There's no world without motion, no life without motion. Obviously, we can think about motion about different scales, about subatomic and about the movement of galaxies. And the movement in general, or of all these, will somehow invoke this idea of chaos. Like, even if we look at the movement of microbes, we see chaos when we just look at it from above, look at the big picture. But then, if we look at it closer, or with more attention, we can somehow find logic in the chaos, and then we also realize how they contribute to life itself, and then what these very rich and valuable processes, how they are not just inevitable, but how they are necessary to our very existence. And just if we think about these ideas that we see, when we look at the sky, we see lights, the stars that we see that are maybe lights that have occurred billions of years ago. These all contain this idea of motion that has an impact on us, that is acting on us. And while motions can be very diverse, so that the type of movements are countless, they have countless forms, but the circular, cyclic movement is a very typical, very important type of of movement. I think that a linear movement, when something goes straight forward, I think it's you have to interpret it, you can interpret it in several ways. I think it's, even a linear movement is circular, since everything that is endless still has an end. It goes beyond our cognitive capacity to comprehend this, to fathom this. But I think if we look at just think about that, if we look at a round object such as a planet, if you look close enough, you will see that it's flat. We did need a couple of centuries until human beings realized that what we see as flat is actually a round thing. And also it took even longer that if what we perceive as a linear light, it's still something that has a curve. But I think that this fact, this cyclical motion, which also contains this idea of repetition, the cyclical idea, which is also a very basic form of all existence, this unconscious connection with this contact has a very curious, peculiar impact on people. Probably we don't have the time to delve into this and to go into detail about all these, but I hope that if you read the book, then maybe you will somehow, if not understand it, but somehow think of these things, or it will inspire similar thoughts in you, that this the connection between all these impressions about seeing colors, about seeing the movement, about acting on an object, and all these various little factors contribute to the experience. And that's the mysteriously engaging thing, the experience. And if it's a good experience, then we want to repeat it again, repetition, and then we will try to do it again. And I think that the cube is really an object that you can't really solve it, because once you did it, you will want to do it again. As soon as you've solved the cube, the colors are in their places, then you will mix them together and start again. It's unfinished. It's never really solved. It's a continuous experience.
Amikor tanuljuk a kocka kirakását,
when we learn how to solve the cube, at least when I was learning the method.
Bocsánat. A helyes szóhasználatot majd megtudom.
Yeah, I don't know the technical terms to use, but
hallottam azt a gondolatot.
I've heard the idea several times that actually you just the elements want to return to their original places, to their original state. So they will. It does have a sense of will to return to their original places, and in a process they will eventually return to their places. What I want to know is, when you are solving the brain, when you are solving the cube, the brain and the hands are working together, so there is a connection between them. When I'm doing it, I experience that I have a great difficulty to coordinate my brain and my hands, and to actually have a synchronized and efficient, successful movement of my hands directed by my brain. But I do think that there is a connection, and I know that those who can solve the cube will have a better process of this. And my question is that, what do you think about this connection of brain and hand? The way I see the world is that this connection is what makes us human. That we have something here in our heads that is able to give instructions to this very sophisticated instrument, our hands, with 2 times 5 fingers, and their very, very, very diverse movements, or scope of movement. And I think that is the objective, that the brain give instructions to the hands, and then it will do something that the brain has thought. For me, the cube is a tool an instrument. I think using tools, especially in this building of that is the temple of using tool and creating tools, designing tools. So I think that objects are usually things that we create that meet our needs, that can create further needs than that we then again try to solve by creating other objects. I'm sorry about because I just made a comment earlier that because when I hear the Hungarian word that it's difficult to translate into English when they say that I complete the cube. You can't really complete something. It's not the Hungarian word actually uses the verb putting something, to put cube to its place. But I object to this because we are not putting anything anywhere. We can put the whole cube on the table, but we're not putting anything anywhere. That's a jigsaw puzzle. It's the jigsaw puzzle and it's also not something that we put. That we rather. So anyway, the cube is something that you can move and turn, but it's not really something that you put, or the parts of it you put anywhere. The jigsaw puzzle have different objectives. It has its pattern recognition with the puzzle pieces. You put it here and there, and then you will have something that you can then recognize. So I think that. But this is again something that is more that has more to do with user interfaces, which, by the way, has more and more to do with our lives. And I think that the cube. I think cube is also an object that is getting more and more modern. If you think about pixel art, that in early screens, the pixels on the screen were huge. You could actually discern the little elements on the screen and little cubies. So actually, this parallel with the cube was very obvious. We even thought about a multi-dimensional art. The multi-dimensional art did use the cube as a tool or as an instrument in it. But that was a different way of use. It's no witchcraft. It was just a work of art, three-dimensional art. It's interesting, and one of the elements of this is of why the cube was sometimes brought to school, or why we encourage. Especially in the States, we try to encourage the use of the cube in teaching materials, not just to think about the mathematics of the cube or the content or the logistics of it, solving the puzzle, but also of the art, quote-unquote art, that can be created by using the cube.
Ugye most nagyon sok témát érintettük.
Learning, we have touched upon many topics now, but I think that teaching is one of that, and I think that this already shows to the people, to the audience, that this book is a very multi-level, multifaceted, a very complex book. And you talk about the learning curve, the learning process. What does that mean to you exactly? Where do you feel that you are participating in a learning process? And when do you feel that you are participating in a teaching process? Where do you draw the line?
Olyan világban élünk, ahol a long life learning, tehát az egész.
We live in a world where lifelong learning is a notion that has become more and more common. And why? I think that this notion, this thought has been with us, has always been with us, but it's just the speed of change, speed of learning. We didn't have this necessity of learning new things because the innovations that are around us, this acceleration of innovations requires people to adapt more quickly. And also the amount of new knowledge. We will soon get to a point where as soon as we finish our studies, what we've learned in the first year will have been obsolete or will have been outdated by then, by the time we graduate. Our kids will learn from books that we've never seen, not to talk about our grandchildren. For me, learning is a very basic feature, part of our lives of human. It's an activity that is integral part of our lives. It creates a value, it has value, represents value. And it goes beyond acquiring knowledge. At least for me.
Learning by doing
is something that I prefer. So if you learn something through the actual action, it's not just to learn the knowledge or to but it's always connected to some sort of activity. It's a very empirical way of learning. That's how you will acquire the skill. That's how you will... It's not just to know how to do something or know that we can do, but that we know that we can do it quickly, in good quality and in a big quantity. That's all part of the learning process, and hopefully, well, it starts before kindergarten, and hopefully it ends even after we are retired. For you, something started here at this university with the cube, and what you've been doing and the way you created the cube, you were folding papers into cubes, and then you were carving from wood little cubies, you just set them next to one another and then try to arrange them into problems that then later can be solved, and etc. So this process, how much do you remember of it, or what have you taken away of this process? How is it present still in your life? You mean it was actually the predecessor of this institution was the College of Applied Arts. We are in the very building where the cube was created. The workshops were on the sub-zero level, so not in this very prestigious auditorium, obviously. But I think that a novelty is not made of high-tech technology. I think it's very often it's the combination and by the contribution of ancient methods and ancient tools from a different perspective. For the first cube, I did not need 3D printing, not even digital production technologies. Today I'm just writing the program, sending it, and then the machine will somehow produce what I have conceived on my computer. So the first cubes did not need any of that. We just needed a saw. We had to cut the material. We needed sandpaper to make it more smooth. The surface is smooth. About the... we also needed the... we also needed a drill, which can be used for two things. One is either you drill a hole, or you can actually use it as a round saw. So we can actually just carve something in a round shape, in a spherical shape. And with this drill, I was able to carve or create this sphere that is the middle, in the center of the cube. The first cube was bigger in size, in terms of size, because I had a bigger size piece of wood that I started experimenting with. Then I used a different type of wood, a tropical forest from a tropical wood material, which was easier to carve, and that's all we needed. We just needed no technologies, nothing high tech, just the idea, the patience, and then the perseverance, and the persistence to experiment with these tools. And well, it took some time, but we see where it got me. One of the last questions that I want to ask, that we live in a world where puzzles, problems and solutions, questions and answers play a very important role. I think that this period of time does raise countless questions in all of us. What do you think that the cube can represent, or what does the cube give as a message to our current age? I think that questions and answers and problems and solutions were always around us. I think that the ones that we are facing today are more felt on our skins, but I think that even I think that history books don't really write about these things. They write about battles won and lost, about marriages, about how people thought, and conspiracies and all these events and how they were fighting against each other. I think that the challenges of our current, our current reality is really how we can solve the challenges that we are faced. And I think that the cube does represent something of this, that it's even very complex problems that might seem unsolvable or hopeless can be solved in the end and have different solutions. It's not something that I just look at and I see that, okay, I'm smart, I can solve this. It's something that I have to invest the time in and the effort. And also, usually, as I said, the problems usually have more than one solutions. Probably the solutions of our reality are even more like this. It's not just either this solution or that solution. We have to, so realizing the fact that solutions can be something much less concrete, that one can be creative with several solutions even. I think that realizing this is one of the big challenges that we have to overcome. And I think that we see this with the current pandemic as well. And I think that it's something that these are challenges that so I think the solution of this has not become any simpler, it has become more difficult. These problems are getting more complex and more difficult. In today's world, when human activity, when the efficiency of human activity has somehow increased drastically, if people are not active, has just as great of an impact. So we see that these things have gone to the extremes. It's a contradiction, I know. How can we protect ourselves and protect the world and the planet and our culture and society? So I want to commend the future generations for if and when they will achieve this solution. And thank you very much for having listened to me. Thank you very much for talking to me, and congratulations for your book.
Ez be van kapcsolva. Köszönjük szépen ez izgalmas beszélgetést.
Thank you very much for this exciting conversation to Ádám Halmos and Erno Rubik. So I'm pretty sure that every one of us has already so we've already held a Rubik's Cube in our hands in our lives. I'm sure that some of us have already managed to solve a cube, probably not as fast as my guests, Balázs Bernát, Norbert Héa, the speed cubers, the champions of solving the cube puzzle. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bernát Balázs, and this is Norbert Héa, and we came here to show you a different aspect of the cube, not just how you can put it back. I'm sorry, not put it anywhere. How to solve the puzzle. Okay, let's just see just a simple contest with Norbert. We usually mix the cubies for each other so that you can so that it's difficult for the other, and you can see the timer that will measure the time. So 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, Norbert had 13, I had 14 seconds usually. I'm the one who talks, and then he's the one who wins. Let's make it more interesting. How about solving the puzzle with one hand? Are you... okay, let's do it with our left hands, because we both are... right-handed. So, okay, let's start with our left hands. I've got all the time. I might have messed it up. Are you anxious? I hope you have all the time as well. Okay, so for me it took 20 seconds. For Norbert it took more. Let's just leave it at that. And in the end we'll make it even more interesting, but let's make it a surprise. We won't reveal any more details about this challenge. We will have to concentrate, so we ask you to be silent. So 1, 2, 3.
Na hát ebből is látszik.
Well, this shows you as well that it's a very difficult challenge, and it's not always easy to solve it, and luckily at least one of us did solve it to 100%. Thank you for your attention. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here, and just one last thing, that you can see a very interesting mosaic book cover in the background, and I invite you to look at it as you exit the auditorium, and I would like to thank you again for being here, and have a very great evening.